Hey guys, Tom here with more Hearthstone. I want to talk a little bit about how to construct a deck, because I saw this deck on Reddit. Let's hop right into Hearthstone and take a look at it. I'm calling it Reddit Drewloc, because it is a Druid Murloc deck. I almost got caught on Marlock there, because Warlocks and Murlocs go together in this game. In the past meta, this was like something you'd see all the time, is Warlocks running Murlocs. So like constructing this deck becomes really super easy, because all that you do is like your first 20 cards in the deck are just like you search for Murloc and you throw everything in except for Cold Light Oracle and Hungry Crab. And that's like the first 12 cards in your deck, and then you just kind of like flesh it out with stuff that kills people really quickly, and you end up with this deck. It's a tribal deck because it's just a whole ton of Murlocs together, and they have things like when a Murloc is summoned, gain +1 attack. They all sort of help each other, the other Murlocs, and this is something that you'd see really commonly with Warlocks prior to Blood Imp getting nerfed. So we'll have to get out of this deck in order to take a look at Blood Imp. A little bit of an aside, but Blood Imp, where are you? Oh, I've disenchanted all my Blood Imps because they're terrible now. They used to give all of you, they were stealth, they were 1/1 creatures, and they used to give all of your minions +1 health. So they're really hard to remove because they're stealth, meaning they can't be targeted or attacked, and yeah, they're just a giant pain in the ass. You have to use AoE to clear them, and AoE doesn't really start being a thing until about turn 4 in this game. So let's hop in, because I think that this deck is an example of making mistakes in constructing a deck, and I want to talk about it. So I'm not going to name any names about the Reddit user that put it up. I really do appreciate anyone that's trying to grow the meta, and that's kind of the important thing here. Is, you know, hell yeah, go try new things. Go try and make a Murloc warrior. Do this. Do that. Go right now. But in this case, I think the problem here, alright, so if you're making a Murloc deck, what you want to do, sort of by the very nature of Murlocs, is you want to make a deck that can get a whole bunch of Murlocs on the board and kill your opponent. Boom, done. Warlock was really strong for doing this because they have the hero power of lose 2 life and draw a card. And if you're trying to kill your opponent as quickly as possible, you don't really care what your life is at. You're planning on losing if the game goes late game anyways, so depleting your health is not a big deal, and it gets you more cards in hand to play these super cheap Murlocs, and tons of them. So right off the bat, like, we're kind of down that synergy when we're making a Druid Murloc deck. This deck's not without merit, so let's go through and say like what's right about it. So we've got all of the Murloc synergy first off, and we've got some things that are helpful early game for Druid. So we've got Innervate, which allows you to kick out more Murlocs faster. I don't know that Innervate's actually a great card in this, but I'll come back to why. So let's just say it's good for now. You can kick out more Murlocs onto the board faster, accelerating your deck basically. A Hungry Crab I think is a mistake. Destroy a Murloc and gain +2/+2. You're not going to see many other Murloc decks out there right now. And so even if you're dropping this on turn 2 and you're getting a 3/4 out of it, like, it's then not going to be buffed by things like Murloc War Leader or Cold Light Seer, or even where are you? Where's that one drop? Grimscale Oracle. So the fact that Hungry Crab's not himself a Murloc is kind of a downside for this deck, but he's a cool looking card. He's got good artwork. I like that about him. Wrath is actually a great card because you can draw another Murloc if you only need to deal 1 damage to something, or you can deal 3 damage to a minion that would otherwise be like, you know, maybe stomping a lot of your Murlocs. So that's like a fairly Murloc efficient card. 1 damage for 2 mana is a little bit costly, but if you can also get another Murloc out or use it to remove a threat from the board, it's okay. I think that there's a possibility that Claw or even Naturalize would be better in this spot. But regardless, just having early removal to complement your early game board presence is a good idea, because it allows you to clear out things that could kill a lot of your Murlocs. Mark of Nature, I'm real torn on. I don't really see exactly why it's in this deck. And that's sort of where let's start getting to the problems with this deck. Is this deck has too many goals, I feel. I think that it would have been better if it would have stuck with what kills my opponent. Go. Just kill my opponent. That's the goal, is get efficient cards out that kill my opponent. And Mark of Nature is sort of one of a few different cards that I would categorize flatly as a mistake in this deck. So give a minion +4 attack or +4 health and taunt. 4 damage for 3 mana isn't great value. If we compare this, so if you're using for attack, and I think that that's how you'd mostly want to be using it in this deck, it's not great. Arguably, you want to be doing the health and taunt in order to defend things like Murloc War Leader that's buffing the rest of your Murlocs, but in general, I feel like when I draw Mark of Nature, I'm going to be unhappy with it more often than not. I'd just probably rather have that card be a Murloc, and that's sort of a bad sign, because in Warlock aggression with Murlocs, even now, it's like, if you draw a Voidwalker, a 1/3 with taunt, that's a much more efficient way of defending your Murloc War Leader at 1 mana than Mark of Nature is. Soul of the Forest, I think, is pretty good, actually. Give your minions Death Rattle, summon a 2/2 Treant. So if you've got a ton of minions on the board, this is a really, really efficient card to play. It prolongs the threat that you have on the board. Swipe is a good card to compare something like Mark of Nature to. So Swipe is deal 4 damage to an enemy and 1 damage to all other enemies. Swipe's just a phenomenal card, period. I think it works in this deck. I think it works in almost any Druid deck. It's just really efficient. And then we've got Old Murkai, of course, he's great. But Ancient of War is incredibly awkward in this deck. So he's a 7-drop, and you can have taunt and +5 health or +5 attack. But how is he furthering the goal of killing our opponent as quickly as possible? He's more of a card that's very strong for only being 1 card. He's not going to really help that often. Most of the time, in fact, with this deck, your game is going to be either won or lost by turn 7. Even if you've got an Innervate, by turn 5, you're pretty much waxing, and your opponent's going to be getting stronger and stronger from then on out. So those are sort of some of my thoughts on this deck. There's some things that are good, and there's some things that are bad. But I don't think that it's particularly singular in its focus, and I think that that's the big problem with it, is that it's trying to do too many things at once. It's trying to have Mark of Nature and Ancient of War, these kind of... I mean, Mark of Nature I think is just not very good. And Wrath, mostly you want to play Wrath in order to do the +1 damage and draw a card with some spell power on the board so that it's actually reasonably efficient. That's kind of the usual use of Wrath, or to remove something that you really need removed. But I think, so it's a little bit too widespread. So I'm going to show you a little bit of how I think a reasonable modification of this deck would be. I still don't think it's a great deck, but I think if you're going to do Murloc Druid, this might be a better idea. Alright? First off, we're adding in Leroy Jenkins. We're trying to kill our opponent quickly. Leroy Jenkins is freaking amazing if you want to kill your opponent quickly. Always. Keep Swipe, keep all the Murlocs, of course. Adding in Savage Roar. If you have a ton of Murlocs on the board, Savage Roar probably wins you the game. Just by dealing a ton of damage to your opponent. It's huge reach if you've got minions on the board. Napeggle, actually I don't believe that. I don't believe Napeggle should be in this deck. Boom, he's gone. I am missing 2 spots, because I'm going to talk a little bit about what we should add at the end of our mana curve here, if anything. Millhouse Mana Storm? Potentially on turn 2 you drop him and he wins the game. Potentially on turn 2 you drop him and he burns removal from your opponent that they get to cast for free. Rarely is Millhouse Mana Storm a bad card if you can drop him on turn 2. If your opponent's had an opportunity to draw a lot of cards and you've had an opportunity to build up a lot of Murlocs, you might just hold Millhouse Mana Storm. But sometimes he will allow you to immediately take control of the game. On turn 2, Knife Juggler. We're casting a lot of minions. We're casting them real early. They're real cheap. Knife Juggler throws out damage. Great in aiding that purpose of killing our opponent really quickly. More Murlocs. I've got Blood Mage Thalnos in here. Not positive. I like the fact that he replaces himself even in this deck. He makes Wrath a little bit more efficient. He makes Swipe a little bit more efficient. Still a questionable card in this deck, I feel, but has a place in most decks. I don't think he's terrible in this deck. He's really aiding in our board clear. That's mostly it. Is like, you know, you've got to be able to clear off the board with swipe and keep going with your Murlocs. And that's where Blood Mage Thalanos might really be important. Naturalize. I think that this is a good card to have one of in the deck. You don't want, like, it's not a cornerstone of the deck or anything like that, but you can kill a minion, your opponent draws 2 cards, you don't really care, you probably want to kill them when they have 4 cards in their hand anyways. Here, take some cards, I don't care, I'm just going to be trying to be super mana efficient. And if this killed a Druid of the Claw, a 4/6 taunt, you're really happy about having Naturalize, because on that same turn you can still play a ton of Murlocs. Great card, I think, in this deck. Claw. Just deals 2 damage. You can use it to kill your opponent, you can use it to kill off some minions. It costs 1 as opposed to 2. I think it's better than Wrath in this deck. I don't think it's better than Wrath in general, but in this deck, I think it's better than Wrath. So we've got 3 slots here. I'm going to go ahead and add back in a Young Priestess. Here I am yielding to the wisdom of Reddit, because they had a Young Priestess in there before, and I had taken it out. But I think that it's probably better than Nat Pagel. In this deck, of course. Alright, so now what I want to talk about is, like, here's our mana curve right now. Alright. Super early game, nothing at all at the end of the game. What, if anything, should we be placing at the end of this mana curve? And I'm gonna say that we should. It's a little bit of a thought experiment, but I'm gonna say that we should. That there should be something at the end there. And I'm gonna posit that it should be either Force of Nature, Starfire, or Ancient of Lore. Alright, like, just go with me here. Alright, just go with it. Alright? So Force of Nature is 3/2/2 Treants with charge, die at the end of the turn. Starfire is deal 5 damage and draw a card. Ancient of Lore is draw 2 cards or restore 5 health. So right off the bat, I'm looking at Ancient of Lore. Normally this card's 100% core in Druid decks. It's a phenomenal card if you're playing a typical Druid control deck. I don't think it has a place in this deck, though. Here's why. It's coming out on turn 7. You're not going to be able to drop anything else on the turn that you dropped it. Game's probably already decided, like, if you have Murlocs on the board at turn 7, they should be almost dead. Or dead anyways. If you don't have Murlocs on the board at turn 7, you probably should have conceded by now. This deck is going to either win or lose very quickly. Which leads me to Starfire. So, they both deal 5 damage, right? 5 damage creature versus 5 damage. This one deals the 5 damage immediately. You draw 1 card. Comes out 1 mana sooner. I think in this deck, it's way superior to Ancient of Lore. You're not getting that card draw, but again, your goal is to crush people as quickly as possible. I think Starfire is better. Lastly, Force of Nature. So we're only running 1 Savage Roar, so that's very slight synergy with Force of Nature. So summon 3/2/2 Treants with charge, die at the end of the turn. This is 6 damage, it's 6 mana. It's only got 1 case, 1 card, combo. At turn 9, we could Savage Roar Force of Nature. Alright, I said that the game was probably decided by turn 7. By turn 9, you know what I think. Game's long gone. So, in a thought experiment where we're only deciding between these 3 cards, I'm gonna go with Starfire. And we're gonna run with that. We're gonna run with that and pretend that it's good. It's probably not. Probably we should just skew even more heavily towards the early game and find stuff to go kill them. But at this point, like, I don't know, maybe even Bite's better, in all honesty. Like, there's a lot of options, another Savage Roar. Power of the Wild would actually combo pretty well with this deck. And you know what? That was a fun thought experiment, but let's actually go ahead and drop Power of the Wild in there. Try and just buff our minions. Or drop a 3/2 Panther. Either way, I think that's good. Let's go ahead and hop in and play a game with our Murloc. We're only rank 11, but that's alright. People are still fairly competitive at rank 11. Believe it or not. Believe it or not, that's not a terrible rank. I did play a dude that was playing a Pirate Warrior earlier. I played against him with Murlocs, and I beat him. He dropped Grommash Hellscream in some bizarre Pirate Warrior deck. And then, the turn after that, I killed him and I used Moonfire for lethal. Yeah, that's right, I was running Moonfire. That's how like, mana tempo-y I was going with that.